Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now. Sit back and enjoy the story asterisk. The elevator climbed toward the 15th floor with agonizing slowness. Each floor a countdown to what Cindy Martinez knew would be another sleepless night. The bass from the penthouse above had been rattling her windows for 3 hours straight, turning her modest apartment into a prison of pounding rhythms and muffled laughter. She pressed her palms against her temples, feeling the familiar throb of exhaustion behind her eyes. Tomorrow's client presentation loomed like a storm cloud, and she still had 2 illustrations to finish for her freelance work. The double life of surviving in Manhattan on a graphic designer's salary left no room for recovery, no buffer for nights like these. The music grew louder as she stepped into the hallway. Other residents had already retreated behind their doors, resigned to another night of disrupted sleep courtesy of their wealthy neighbor. But something hot and fierce bloomed in Cindy's chest as she marched toward the stairwell, her bare feet slapping against the cold marble. The penthouse door gleamed under the hallway's soft lighting, a barrier of mahogany and privilege that separated her world from his. She raised her fist and pounded against it with all the frustration of 3 months' worth of sleepless nights. "Open up." Her voice cracked with exhaustion and fury. "Some of us have to work in the morning." Music didn't even pause. If anything, it seemed to grow louder, as if mocking her desperation. Cindy pounded again, harder this time, her knuckles stinging against the reinforced wood. "I know you can hear me. You think because you live in the penthouse, the rest of us don't matter?" Finally, the music dimmed. Footsteps approached from the other side, slow and deliberate. The door swung open to reveal a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread for expensive watches and Italian suits. Even at 2 in the morning, even clearly having been drinking, he possessed an effortless elegance that made Cindy, acutely aware of her coffee-stained pajamas and unwashed hair. His dark hair was tousled just enough to suggest carelessness rather than sleep, and his honey-colored eyes swept over her with an assessment that felt both intimate and dismissive. A smile played at the corners of his mouth, the kind of expression that suggested he found her amusing rather than threatening. "Well, well." His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. The angry neighbor from downstairs. "Let me guess. The music's too loud." "Too loud?" Cindy's voice pitched higher with disbelief. "It's 2 in the morning. People are trying to sleep." He leaned against the doorframe, completely unbothered by her fury. Behind him, she could see glimpses of his apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering Manhattan skyline, and she caught sight of expensive artwork on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than her annual rent. "It's a Friday night," he said with a shrug. "People should be out having fun, not sleeping. Some people work Saturdays." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Some people can't afford to party every night of the week. That sounds like a personal problem." The casual cruelty of his response hit her like a physical blow. In that moment, something inside Cindy snapped. All the exhaustion, all the financial stress. All the nights she'd lain awake listening to his parties while calculating how many hours of sleep she might still get. It all crystallized into pure rage. "You know what?" Her voice echoed down the hallway, loud enough that several doors cracked open. "You're exactly what's wrong with this city. You think your money gives you the right to make everyone else miserable?" His smile faltered slightly, but she was just getting started. "I bet you've never worked a real day in your life. Never had to choose between groceries and rent. Never had to stay up until 3 a.m. working on freelance projects just to pay student loans." Her finger jabbed toward his chest, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his expensive shirt. "You're a spoiled, entitled brat who thinks the world exists for your entertainment." A small crowd had gathered now. Mrs. Chen from 14B stood in her doorway with her arms crossed. The young couple from 12 appeared out with wide eyes. Even Mr. Rodriguez, the building's night security guard, had appeared at the end of the hallway. "And you know what the worst part is?" Cindy continued, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. "You don't even care. You see people like me as props in your little kingdom. Well, guess what, Your Majesty? Some of us have real lives, real responsibilities, and real dreams that don't revolve around your next party. Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Even the music from his apartment had stopped completely. He studied her face with those unsettling golden eyes, and for a moment, she thought she saw something flicker there. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Interesting, he murmured finally, and his voice had lost some of its casual arrogance. It's very interesting. Then, to everyone's complete shock, he smiled. Not the practiced, charming expression from before, but something genuine and almost wondering. "What's your name?" The question caught her off guard. "What? Your name?" "I think I should know the name of the woman who just publicly dissected my character in front of half the building." "Cindy," she said automatically, then immediately wished she hadn't. "Well, Cindy." He extended his hand as if they were being introduced at some elegant cocktail party, instead of standing in a hallway in the middle of the night with her in pajamas. In fury, "I'm Victor Blackwood." She stared at his outstretched hand like it might bite her. "I don't care who you are. Just keep the music down." Without another word, she turned and stalked back toward the elevator, leaving behind a stunned crowd and one very intrigued billionaire who had just experienced something entirely new in his privileged life. As the elevator doors closed, she caught a glimpse of him still standing in his doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She had no idea that her late-night outburst had just made her the most fascinating person Victor Blackwood had encountered in his 28 years of carefully orchestrated existence. And she definitely had no idea that the game between them was just beginning. Victor Blackwood had never been called a spoiled brat to his face. In his 28 years of existence, he'd overheard whispers at charity galas and business functions, but no one had ever possessed the audacity to say it directly to him. Until last night. He sat in his corner office on the 52nd floor of Blackwood Tower, supposedly reviewing quarterly projections, but his mind kept drifting to furious dark eyes and coffee-stained pajamas. The morning sun streamed through floor to ceiling, windows casting long shadows across his mahogany desk, but all he could think about was the way she'd stood her ground against him, unimpressed by his wealth or status. Sir Marcus Chen, his assistant, knocked on the glass door. "Your 10 o'clock is here. Your Henderson merger needs your approval." "Cancel it," Victor said without looking up from his computer screen, though he wasn't actually reading the financial reports displayed there. "Cancel everything until noon." Marcus raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Of course, sir. Is there anything else you need? Information?" Victor finally turned his chair around to face his assistant. "I need you to find out everything you can about someone." "Industrial espionage, sir?" Marcus asked, pulling out his tablet with practiced efficiency. "Corporate reconnaissance." Victor leaned back in his leather chair, a smile playing at his lips. "Personal research. Cindy Martinez, apartment 15B at the Meridian Tower. I want to know where she works, what she does, her background, everything." Marcus paused mid-type. "Sir, if I may ask about the nature of this request, you may not." Victor's tone carried the finality that ended most conversations, but there was an amused glint in his eyes. "Just get me the information, discreetly."
Ow.
Within 2 hours, Marcus had compiled a file that would have impressed federal investigators. Victor reviewed it with growing fascination and something that felt suspiciously like respect. Cindy Alina Martinez, 26, born in Houston, Texas. 2 immigrant parents who had owned a small restaurant until her father's heart attack forced them to sell. Full scholarship to Parsons School of Design, graduated summa cum laude, despite working 3 part-time jobs. No trust fund, no family money, no safety net. Everything she had, she'd earned through sheer determination and talent. She worked at Sterling & Associates, a mid-tier design firm in Soho where she was apparently undervalued and underpaid. But her real passion lay in freelance illustration work. Marcus had somehow managed to access her portfolio, and the images took Victor's breath away. They were vibrant, emotional, authentic, in a way that most art in his world wasn't. Raw and honest, like the woman herself. Her tiny 1-bedroom apartment cost nearly 60% of her monthly income. She had student loans, credit card debt from her father's medical bills, and worked 70-hour weeks just to stay afloat in a city that devoured dreams for breakfast. Yet her illustrations sang with hope and resilience, street scenes from her old neighborhood in Houston full of life and warmth and struggle. Victor studied one particular piece for a long time. It showed an elderly man playing guitar on a street corner while children danced around him, their faces bright with joy despite the urban decay surrounding them. The artist I had found beauty in poverty, dignity in hardship. It was everything. His world wasn't. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Don't forget tonight's charity auction. The Worthington girl will be there. Perfect opportunity." Ah, yes, the carefully orchestrated social scene. Another perfectly polished heiress. Another strategic alliance disguised as romance. Another woman who would agree with everything he said and laugh at all his jokes, regardless of whether they were actually funny. Unlike a certain firecracker who had called him entitled and spoiled and hadn't cared about his family name or his net worth, Victor made a decision that would have shocked his board of directors and given his mother a mild stroke.
"Out, Marcus,"
he called out. "Clear my schedule for tonight." "But sir, the Children's Hospital charity auction, your mother specifically requested, send a donation. A substantial one." Victor was already gathering his things. "I have more important business to attend to." Meanwhile, across town at Sterling and Associates, Cindy was having the worst day of her professional life. Her boss, Richard Sterling, had just torn apart her latest campaign for a homeless veterans nonprofit, claiming it was too emotional, too raw, too authentic for their corporate clients. "They want safe and sanitized," Richard had said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Not this bleeding heart manipulation." Cindy stared at her computer screen, trying to figure out how to remove the humanity from images meant to humanize forgotten veterans. Every revision felt like betraying her artistic integrity, like taking something beautiful and making it bland. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate and best friend, Lisa. "Bad day. You look like you want to set something on fire?" Cindy glanced across the office to see Lisa grinning at her from the accounting department. Lisa had an uncanny ability to read Cindy's moods from 50 feet away. "Worse," Cindy texted back. "I think I'm selling my soul 1 pixel at a time. Coffee after work. I have news that might distract you from your existential crisis." "What kind of news? Remember your Penthouse prints from last night? I did some research." Cindy's heart performed an uncomfortable somersault in her chest. She told herself it was dread, not curiosity. "Don't care." "Sure you don't. Joe's coffee at 6. Cindy, you might want to sit down for this one." The rest of the afternoon crawled by like a wounded animal. Every time Cindy tried to focus on sanitizing her heartfelt campaign, her mind wandered to honey-colored eyes and that infuriating smile. By 5:30, she was practically sprinting toward the elevator. Joe's coffee was their usual emergency meeting spot, a tiny cafe wedged between a laundromat and a used bookstore. Lisa was already there, practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Okay," Cindy said, sliding into the booth across from her friend. "Ah, what's got you looking like you swallowed a secret?" Lisa leaned forward conspiratorially. "Your Penthouse prince has a name, Victor Blackwood." Cindy shrugged. "A rich guy with a rich guy name. Shocking, Cindy." Lisa's eyes were wide. "Blackwood, as in Blackwood Industries, is in one of the most powerful corporations in America. It's in his family, is worth approximately $12 billion. The coffee cup slipped from Cindy's fingers. It's clattering against the saucer and sending brown liquid splashing across the table. 12 billion with a B. Lisa nodded, pulling out her phone to show Cindy a Forbes article. The headline read, "America's Most Eligible Bachelor Heir Takes Control of Family Empire." Below it was a photograph of Victor in an expensive tuxedo, looking devastating and untouchable at some charity gala. "He's not just rich, Cindy. He's stupid rich. Old money rich. Bias mall country rich." Lisa wiped up the spilled coffee with napkins. "And according to this article, he's single, brilliant, and considered one of the most influential men under 30 in the business world." Cindy stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. This was the man she'd screamed at in her pajamas. The man she'd called a spoiled brat in front of half the building. The man whose family probably owned the company that manufactured the phone she was looking at. "Oh God," she whispered. "I'm so fired. He probably owns my apartment building. He could have me evicted with a phone call." "Actually," Lisa said, scrolling through more articles, "according to property records, Blackwood Industries doesn't own residential real estate. But Cindy, there's something else."
What else could
"There possibly be?" Lisa's expression grew serious. "He's known for being ruthless in business. There are rumors about people who've crossed the Blackwood family just disappearing from their industries. Not physically," she added quickly, seeing Cindy's expression. "But their careers, their opportunities, their reputations, gone." Cindy felt ice forming in her stomach. She thought about her precarious job situation, her mounting debts, her dreams of making it as an independent artist. Everything she'd worked for could vanish because she'd lost her temper with the wrong person. "I'm dead," she said quietly. "My career is over before it even started." "Maybe not," Lisa said thoughtfully. "Maybe he'll respect the fact that you treated him like a normal person instead of kissing his ring." But as Cindy walked home through the darkening streets of Manhattan, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a sharp turn toward disaster. She'd challenged a billionaire heir in front of witnesses, and men like Victor Blackwood didn't forget slights like that. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Victor was sitting in his penthouse, staring at her illustration portfolio and feeling something he'd never experienced before. For the first time in his privileged life, someone had seen past his money and status to the person underneath and somehow found him wanting. It was the most honest interaction he'd ever had, and he couldn't stop thinking about it.
The game
between them was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Cindy spent the weekend in a state of anxious paranoia, jumping every time her phone rang and checking her email obsessively for termination notices or eviction warnings. But Monday morning arrived with nothing more threatening than her usual overflowing inbox and Richard's passive-aggressive comments about her emotional design choices. She was hunched over her computer trying to make a campaign for literacy programs look more corporate-friendly when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice was unmistakable. "Ms. Martinez, this is Victor Blackwood." Her blood turned to ice water. Around her, the office buzzed with typical Monday morning energy. But suddenly she felt completely isolated, as if she were trapped in a bubble of her own making. "Mr. Blackwood." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I suppose you're calling to threaten me?" A pause, then unexpectedly laughter. Rich and genuine, not at all what she'd been expecting. "Actually, I'm calling to offer you a job." "A what now? A job?" "I've seen your portfolio, your real work, not the sanitized corporate material. You're wasted at Sterling and Associates." Cindy's mind reeled. This had to be some kind of trap, a setup designed to humiliate her even further. "I don't understand." Blackwood Industries is launching a new initiative, a foundation focused on urban development and community art programs. "We need someone who understands authentic storytelling, someone who can see beauty in unexpected places."
your work with?
"The Homeless Veterans Campaign, even before your boss neutered it. It's exactly what we're looking for." She stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. Across the office, she caught Lisa watching her with concerned curiosity. "You want to hire me? After I called you a spoiled brat in front of half the building. Especially because you did that." His voice carried a warmth she hadn't heard before. "Do you know how many people tell me exactly what they think I want to hear? How many meetings I sit through where everyone agrees with everything I say, regardless of whether it makes sense? That's not my problem, isn't it? You're the one stuck in a job that undervalues your talent. Working for a man who wouldn't recognize authentic art if it bit him on his corporate backside?" Despite herself, Cindy felt a smile tugging at her lips. "How do you know about Richard?" "I may have done some research. I'm thorough when something interests me." The implication hung between them like a charged wire. She was something that interested him. The thought sent an unwelcome thrill down her spine. "What makes you think I'd want to work for you?" Because Victor said quietly, "I'm offering you the chance to do work that matters. Real budgets for real causes, creative freedom to tell stories that need telling. And before you ask, yes. The salary would be substantially more than what Sterling pays you." Cindy closed her eyes, fighting against the temptation. Everything about this felt like a trap, but it was exactly the kind of trap she'd been dreaming of falling into her entire career. I need to think about it, of course. But Cindy, the way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. Don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. After he hung up, Cindy stood frozen in the middle of the office, phone still pressed to her ear. This was insane. Victor Blackwood, billionaire heir and corporate prince, was offering her a dream job after she'd publicly humiliated him. It defied all logic. Earth to Cindy. Lisa appeared at her elbow. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I think I've just been offered everything I've ever wanted by the last person on earth I should trust. That evening, Cindy found herself walking through Central Park trying to clear her head. The job offer felt too good to be true, which in her experience meant it probably was. Men like Victor Blackwood didn't hand out career-making opportunities to people who'd insulted them. Did they? She was so lost in thought that she almost missed him sitting on a bench near the Shakespeare Garden, feeding pigeons from a paper bag. He'd traded his expensive suit for jeans and a simple sweater, but he still looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Even casual, he possessed an effortless elegance that made her acutely aware of her thrift store clothing and scuffed. Sneakers stalking me now, she called out, approaching the bench with false bravado. He looked up with that devastating smile. Actually, I was hoping you'd show up. Marcus mentioned you walk through here most evenings on your way home from work. Your assistant is spying on me, researching. There's a difference. Gestured to the empty space beside him on the bench. Sit, please. Against her better judgment, she sat, leaving careful space between them. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that made her think of warm skin and quiet conversations. Why? She asked, without preamble. Why offer me the job? And don't give me some line about my portfolio. Victor was quiet for a long moment, tossing breadcrumbs to the gathering pigeons. Right. Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everyone tells you exactly what they think you want to hear? No. I live in a world where people tell me exactly what they think, whether I want to hear it or not. He laughed softly.
Right.
That night when you called me a spoiled brat, when you stood there in your coffee-stained pajamas and told me exactly what you thought of me, it was the first genuine interaction I'd had in months, maybe years. So this is some kind of charity case? Poor little rich boy wants to befriend the angry peasant? Is that what you think? He turned to face her fully, those honey-colored eyes searching her face. That this is some kind of game to me? The intensity of his gaze made her stomach flip, isn't it? No? His voice was quiet but firm. I've seen your work, Cindy. I've seen the way you capture humanity in impossible situations, the way you find hope in heartbreak. That's not something you can fake or buy or manufacture. That's talent, pure and simple. She wanted to argue to maintain her defensive walls, but something in his expression made her pause. There was vulnerability there, carefully hidden but unmistakable. The foundation, she said carefully, it's real, not just some elaborate way to get back at me for embarrassing you. It's real. We're starting with community centers in underserved neighborhoods, art programs for at-risk youth, murals that tell the stories of communities that have been overlooked. I want someone who understands what it means to struggle, what it means to dream despite circumstances. Despite herself, Cindy felt her pulse quickened. This was everything she'd ever wanted to do with her art, everything she'd dreamed of during late nights in her tiny apartment. And if I say yes, what happens then? Then you become the creative director of the Blackwood Community Arts Foundation. You get your own team, your own budget, and the freedom to pursue projects that matter to you. And you get what exactly? Victor smiled, but there was something almost sad in his expression. Maybe I get to work with someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an ass. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun set behind the city's skyline. Cindy felt herself relaxing despite her better judgment. This version of Victor, stripped of his penthouse arrogance, was dangerously appealing. I need guarantees, she said finally. Creative control, no interference from corporate. If I do this, I do it my way. Done. And if it doesn't work out, If you decide you don't like having your decisions questioned, then you walk away with 6 months, severance, and a recommendation letter that will open doors at any arts organization in the country. She studied his profile, trying to read the thoughts behind those expressive eyes. "Why should I trust you?" because Victor said, standing and offering her his hand. "You've already seen the worst of me, and you're still sitting here considering my offer. That has to count for something." Looking up at him silhouetted against the darkening sky, Cindy realized she was about to make a decision that would change everything. She could play it safe, stay at Sterling and Dand Associates, and continue fighting for scraps of creative freedom, or she could take a leap of faith with a man who intrigued and terrified her in equal measure. She took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. His touch was warm, calloused in a way that surprised her, as if he did more than push papers and attend board meetings. "Okay," she heard herself saying, "but I have conditions." His smile was brilliant enough to light up Manhattan.
I wouldn't.
Expect anything less. As they walked out of the park together, Cindy couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped off a cliff. Whether she was falling toward disaster or flying toward her dreams remained to be seen. Deewa's desk with 2 cups of coffee. Her best friend had followed her to the foundation as their financial coordinator, claiming she couldn't stand to work anywhere Cindy wasn't. "I'm thinking," Cindy protested, though she had indeed been watching. Victor through the glass walls of her office as he reviewed budget proposals with their program director. He's thinking about how good he looks in those jeans. "Lisa, don't Lisa me. I've seen the way you two look at each other during meetings." The tension could power half of Brooklyn. Before Cindy could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID made her blood run cold. Richard Sterling, her former boss, hadn't spoken to her since she'd given notice 3 months ago. Cindy. Richard's voice carried an ugly satisfaction that made her stomach clench. "I thought you might want to know that I just got off the phone with some very interesting people." "Richard, I'm busy. This is about the Henderson account transition. This is about your new job, sweetheart. Seems like there are some questions about how exactly you landed such a prestigious position with the Blackwood Foundation." The warehouse suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that involves sleeping your way to the top? The kind that make for very juicy gossip columns." Richard's voice dripped with malicious pleasure. A struggling artist suddenly gets a dream job from a billionaire she publicly embarrassed. People are starting to connect some very interesting dots. Cindy's hands began to shake. "I didn't have to plant anything. I simply shared some observations with a reporter friend about your rapid career advancement. Amazing what people will believe when it confirms their worst suspicions about pretty girls and powerful men." Through her office window, she could see Victor still deep in conversation, oblivious to the bomb that was about to explode around them both. Around her, the foundation buzzed with productive energy, artists and coordinators working on projects that mattered. Kids from the neighborhood creating beauty from nothing. All of it about to be destroyed by lies and innuendo. "What do you want, Richard? Nothing you can give me now. Consider this payback for making me look like a fool when you quit. Enjoy explaining to all those idealistic artists how their noble foundation is really just an elaborate setup for your affair with the boss." The line went dead. Cindy sat frozen, staring at her phone while her world crumbled around her. Everything she'd built here, everything she'd worked for, was about to be painted with the ugliest possible brush. The kids in their after-school programs, the murals bringing life to forgotten neighborhoods, the genuine good they were doing, would all be dismissed as window dressing for a sordid scandal. "Cindy." Victor's voice came from her doorway. "You look pale. Everything okay?" She looked up at him. This man who had given her everything she'd ever wanted professionally would somehow become the center of her emotional world without her permission. In a few hours, maybe less, his reputation would be shredded alongside hers. The foundation would become a liability to his family's empire, and everything they'd built together would disappear. "We need to talk," she said quietly, privately. His expression shifted immediately, concern replacing casual warmth. "My office or yours?" "Yours." And Victor closed the door. 10 minutes later, she had laid out the entire situation while Victor sat behind his desk, his face growing more thunderous with each detail. When she finished, silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Richard Sterling," he said finally, his voice carrying a cold fury she'd never heard before. That mediocre little man is going to destroy everything we've built here because his ego couldn't handle losing a talented employee. It's not about the foundation, Cindy said softly. It's about me. He wants to punish me, and he knows the most effective way to do that is to make it look like I'm sleeping with you for career advancement. Victor stood abruptly, beginning to pace behind his desk. We'll fight it. I'll have my legal team contact every publication, threaten lawsuits that will only make it look more suspicious. Billionaire uses lawyers to silence affair rumors? That's not exactly going to help our case. Then what do you suggest? Cindy took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. I resign immediately. Distance yourself from me. Make it clear that our relationship was always purely professional. Absolutely not. Victor, be realistic. If I stay, every good thing this foundation does will be overshadowed by scandal. Every kid we help, every mural we create, every community we serve, it will all be seen through the lens of our supposed affair. There is no affair. His hands slammed down on his desk. We've never so much as had dinner together outside of work events. The words hung in the air between them, highlighting the careful distance they'd both maintained, despite the growing attraction that charged every interaction. They'd been so careful, so professional, and it hadn't mattered. The appearance of impropriety was enough to destroy them both. That won't matter to the gossip columns, Cindy said quietly. You know that. Victor sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older than his 28 years, so we let him win. We let that small, petty man destroy something beautiful because he can't stand to see talent recognized. We protect what matters most, the foundation, the kids, the communities. We serve that's bigger than either of us. Not to me. His voice was barely above a whisper. Cindy, this foundation, working with you, seeing your vision come to life, it's been the most meaningful thing I've ever done. If I'm being completely honest, somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the work. Her heart stopped. Victor, I know we agreed to keep things professional. I know all the reasons why anything between us would be complicated. But watching you bring art to kids who never thought they could create something beautiful, seeing you fight for communities that everyone else has forgotten, you've made me want to be the man you challenged me to become that night in the hallway. Tears burned behind her eyes. Don't. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Stay, he said simply. Stay and fight with me. We'll weather the scandal together. And when your family's stock price drops because of the negative publicity, when donors pull funding because they don't want to be associated with a foundation built on gossip and innuendo, when those kids lose their art programs because we were too selfish to do the right thing, Victor's silence was answer enough. They both knew she was right. In a world where perception mattered more than truth, their careful professional relationship would be sacrificed on the altar of public opinion. I'll draft my resignation letter tonight, Cindy said, standing on unsteady legs. Effective immediately. You can tell the staff that I received another offer, something I couldn't refuse. Cindy, wait. Victor stood as well, moving around his desk toward her. There has to be another way. She backed toward the door, knowing that if he touched her, if he so much as took her hand, her resolve would crumble completely. There isn't. We both know there isn't. So that's it? You walk away, and we pretend none of this mattered? The pain in his voice nearly broke her. What matters is protecting what we've built. The foundation will survive without me. Find someone else. Someone whose reputation can't be used as a weapon against everything good you're trying to do. I don't want someone else. The words came. Out raw, honest, stripping away all pretense. I want you. Cindy's hand froze on the door handle. In that moment, she wanted nothing more than to cross the room, to let him hold her. To believe that love could conquer scandal and gossip, and the ugly realities of a world that judged women by different standards than men. Instead, she opened the door. Find someone else, Victor. For both our sakes. She walked out of his office, through the warehouse full of artists and dreamers, past the murals that told stories of hope and resilience. By the time she reached the street, tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't look back. Behind her, Victor stood at his office window, watching the woman who had changed his life disappear into the crowded Brooklyn afternoon. He'd offered her everything he could professionally, but what he wanted to give her personally, what they both wanted, had been poisoned by a small man's vindictive jealousy. For the first time in his privileged life, all his money and power meant nothing. He couldn't buy back her reputation or purchase their way out of scandal. He couldn't protect the woman he'd fallen in love with from the consequences of loving him back. The game between them had taken a devastating turn, and for the first time since that night in the hallway, Victor Blackwood didn't know the rules anymore. 6 weeks after Cindy Martinez disappeared from his life, Victor Blackwood sat in his penthouse at 2 a.m, staring at the city lights and listening to the sound of his own carefully controlled breathing. The silence that had once been broken by his parties now felt oppressive, hollow, like an expensive tomb. The gossip columns had run their stories for exactly 3 days before moving on to fresher scandals. Richard Sterling's malicious whispers had created a brief sensation, then faded into the background noise of New York's endless appetite for drama. The foundation continued its work under new leadership, but the spark that Cindy had brought to every project, every interaction, every moment was gone. He'd tried to find her. Marcus had discreetly tracked her movements, discovered she'd taken a teaching position at a community college in Philadelphia, working with art therapy programs for trauma survivors. It was noble work, meaningful work, exactly the kind of thing she would choose. It was also 3 hours away and might as well have been on another planet. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother about yet another social event, another carefully vetted potential bride from an appropriate family. He ignored it just as he'd ignored all her attempts to get him back into the marriage market. The women his mother paraded before him seemed like pale shadows after Cindy's fierce authenticity. A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. Victor frowned, checking the time. Building security was supposed to screen all visitors, especially at this hour. He opened the door expecting to find his night doorman with some emergency, but instead found himself face to face with Lisa Chen. "Before you call security," Cindy's best friend said quickly, "I need 5 minutes. It's about the foundation." "Lisa." I stepped back, allowing her into his apartment. "Is Cindy? She's fine?" Physically. Lisa walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows. Looking out at the city below, she's miserable, and more importantly, she's wrong. Wrong about what? About leaving being the right thing to do. Lisa turned to face him, her expression fierce. "Do you know what she's doing in Philadelphia? She's teaching kids who've been through hell to express their trauma through art. She's brilliant at it. She's making a real difference. But she cries herself to sleep every night because she thinks she destroyed something important by being selfish." Victor's chest tightened. The scandal would have hurt the foundation. "What scandal?" Lisa's voice dripped with sarcasm. 3 days of gossip, page speculation. "Please? You want to know what's hurting the foundation?" "The fact that its founder is walking around like a ghost, making decisions based on fear instead of vision." "I'm protecting your hiding," Lisa interrupted. "You're both hiding, and meanwhile, the kids in our programs are asking where Ms. Martinez went, and the artists on your team are wondering why their fearless leader suddenly seems afraid of his own shadow." Victor sank onto his leather couch, running his hands through his hair. "You don't understand. The gossip, the implications for her reputation will survive a few gossip columns. You know what won't survive? Letting fear make your decisions. Letting small, petty people control your life." Lisa sat across from him, her expression softening slightly. "Victor, in the 6 months I worked at the foundation, I watched you become a different person. Cindy didn't just challenge you that night in the hallway. She changed you, and you changed her too. It's not enough to make her stay. She left because she loves you, you idiot." Lisa's words hit him like a physical blow. She left because she thought staying would hurt you and the foundation, but by leaving, she's hurt all 3 of you anyway. "Even if that's true, what am I supposed to do? Show up in Philadelphia and declare my feelings like some romantic comedy? Real life doesn't work that way." Lisa smiled for the first time since entering his apartment. "Actually, it does. Sometimes, but first you need to fix what's broken here. The foundation is fine. It's better than fine, actually. Donations are up. We've expanded 3 programs. I'm not talking about the foundation." Lisa pulled out her phone. scrolling through what looked like social media posts. I'm talking about Richard Sterling. Victor's expression darkened at the mention of Cindy's former boss. What about him? He's been bragging. At industry events, at cocktail parties, anywhere. People will listen. About how he brought down the high and mighty Cindy Martinez. How he proved that talented women only succeed by sleeping their way to the top. The fury that rose in Victor's chest was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was cold, calculating, and absolutely lethal. He's making himself the hero of his own ugly little story. And worse, he's using Cindy's departure as proof that his accusations were true. Why else would she run away so quickly? He says. Victor stood slowly, his mind already working through possibilities, connections, leverage. The Blackwood family hadn't built their empire by being nice, and Victor had inherited more than just money and good looks. He'd inherited a predator's instinct for destroying his enemies. Lisa, he said quietly, I think it's time someone taught Mr. Sterling about the consequences of crossing the wrong people. 2 weeks later, Richard Sterling sat in his corner office at Sterling & Associates, trying to figure out how his carefully constructed world had collapsed so completely. In the span of 10 days, he'd lost his 3 biggest clients, discovered that his lease wouldn't be renewed, and watched half his staff quit for better positions elsewhere. The final blow came in the form of Marcus Chen, Victor Blackwood's assistant. Walking into his office with a manila folder and a smile that could have frozen hell, Mr. Sterling, I have some documents you might find interesting. Richard opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were copies of invoices, emails, and financial records that painted a very clear picture of corporate embezzlement, client, billings for work never performed, and tax evasion that would make the IRS very interested in Mr. Sterling's business practices. I don't understand, Richard stammered. These are private company records. How did you'd be amazed what a thorough audit reveals, Marcus said pleasantly. Amazing how many irregularities can surface when someone with resources decides to look closely at a company's practices. This is extortion. This is justice. You see, Mr. Sterling, when you decided to spread lies about Ms. Martinez, you made a critical error in judgment. You assumed Mr. Blackwood would simply accept your petty revenge. You were wrong. Marcus placed a second set of documents on the desk. These are offer letters for every one of your former employees, offering them positions with companies in the Blackwood network at substantially higher salaries. They've all accepted. Richard's face had gone pale. You can't do this. I'll fight back. You'll do nothing, Marcus interrupted, his pleasant tone never wavering. Because if you say one more word about Ms. Martinez, if her name so much as passes your lips in anything other than glowing praise, these financial irregularities will find their way to the appropriate authorities. Do I make myself clear? Richard nodded mutely, staring at the documents that represented the end of his career, his reputation, his carefully constructed life of petty power over others. Excellent. Marcus collected the papers and headed for the door. Oh, and Mr. Sterling, Mr. Blackwood wanted me to give you a message. He said to tell you that Ms. Martinez was right about you. You are exactly what's wrong with this industry. 3 days later, Victor stood outside the Philadelphia Community College, where Cindy taught her art therapy classes. Through the window, he could see her working with a group of teenagers, her face animated as she guided them through some creative exercise. She looked thinner than he remembered, but her passion for teaching was evident in every gesture. When the class ended and the students filed out, Victor finally entered the room. Cindy looked up from cleaning paintbrushes and froze, a dozen emotions flickering across her face before she settled on careful neutrality. Victor, what are you doing here? Richard Sterling's company folded yesterday, he said without preamble. Turns out he'd been embezzling from clients for years. Funny how these things come to light when someone bothers to look. She set down the brushes slowly. You destroyed him. He destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. That's not why you're here. No, Victor admitted, moving closer. I'm here because I made a mistake. we made a mistake. Victor, we let fear make our decisions. Let a small, vindictive man chase you away from work you loved, from people who needed you, from me. He stopped just close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. I'm here to ask you to come home. My reputation was never actually damaged. Gossip lasted 3 days. Nobody cares anymore, Cindy. Nobody except us. She turned away, ostensibly to organize her art supplies, but he could see her hands shaking. The foundation is better off. Without the distraction, the foundation is dying without you. Oh, it's functioning, it's growing, it's successful by every metric that matters to board members and donors. But it doesn't have a soul anymore. It doesn't have heart. Find someone else. I tried. His voice was quiet, honest. I interviewed a dozen candidates. All of them qualified, experienced, talented. None of them were you. Finally, she turned to face him, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. What are you asking me, Victor? I'm asking you to come home. I'm asking you to take back your position as creative director. I'm asking you to forgive me for not fighting harder to keep you. He took a deep breath. I'm asking if you think there might be room in your life for something more than just a professional relationship. Victor, we can't. The complications, the power dynamics, so we'll be careful. We'll be transparent. We'll let the work speak for itself and deal with any gossip as it comes. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hands in his. Cindy, I've spent 6 weeks trying to convince myself that letting you go was noble, that protecting you from scandal was more important than fighting for us. But Lisa was right. I was just scared. Lisa came to see you. She did. She made me realize that the woman who called me a spoiled brat in front of half the building, who stood up to me when no one else would, who changed my entire perspective on what it means to use privilege responsibly. That woman wouldn't want to be protected from scandal. She'd want to face it head on. Cindy's tears spilled over then. 6 weeks of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. I missed you, she whispered. I missed the work, the foundation, the kids, but mostly I missed you. Then come home, Victor said, pulling her into his arms. Come home and help me build something beautiful. Come home and keep challenging me to be better. Come home and let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. She looked up at him, this man who had somehow become everything she'd never known she wanted, saw her future reflected in his honey-colored eyes. It wouldn't be simple or scandal-free or conventional, but it would be real, authentic, built on mutual respect and shared passion for making the world a better place. Okay, she said, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. Let's go home. 6 months later, the Blackwood Community Arts Foundation unveiled its largest project yet. It's a series of murals in underserved neighborhoods across Brooklyn that told the stories of resilience, hope, and community. The opening ceremony was attended by hundreds of residents, local politicians, and arts advocates. At the center of it all, Victor and Cindy stood hand in hand, watching children from their after-school programs explain their artwork to visitors. They'd weathered a few more gossip column mentions, some pointed questions at board meetings, and the occasional social media speculation. But they'd also created something beautiful together, both professionally and personally. No regrets? Victor asked quietly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Cindy looked around at the crowds of people celebrating art and community. At the former gang walls now transformed into galleries of hope, at the kids who'd discovered their own creative voices through the Foundation's programs. None, she said firmly. Not a single one. As the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Victor Blackwood and Cindy Martinez stood surrounded by the life they'd built together. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been conventional, but it was theirs. They'd taken a midnight confrontation in a hallway and transformed it into something neither of them had ever imagined possible. Love, it turned out, was just like art. It required courage, authenticity, and the willingness to create something beautiful from the most unexpected circumstances. The end, asterisk, like this video. If the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. and let us know in the comments. Love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.